They called her the hidden jewel of the British monarchy, a queen whose story is far more complex than what Netflix shows on screen. But who really was Queen Charlotte, and how close does the drama come to the truth? History, but fate chose her for a role that would shape the future of the British monarchy. When King George III needed a bride, advisors looked across Europe for a match. They wanted a princess with noble blood, but also one who would not pull Britain into dangerous political alliances. Charlotte, quiet and educated, seemed perfect. At just 17 years old she was chosen, and with little warning she was sent across the sea to England. Imagine that moment, a teenage girl leaving her home forever, stepping into a foreign land where thousands watched her every move. She spoke little English, yet within hours of arriving she was married to the King of Great Britain. The marriage was not a political arrangement alone. It became a personal union that lasted more than 50 years. In fact, theirs was one of the longest royal marriages in British history. She gave birth to 15 children, a fact that shaped the dynasty in ways that are still felt today, because one of her granddaughters would grow up to be Queen Victoria, the monarch who gave her name to an entire era. But Queen Charlotte's story was not only about marriage and motherhood. She brought with her a love for science, art, and especially music. She supported young artists and musicians, including the child prodigy Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. She encouraged botany and gardening, which is why Kew Gardens in London grew under her watch. In this sense, she was not just a silent queen in the background. She left her mark on British culture, even though her political influence was limited. Still, what most fascinates historians today is not just her cultural influence, but her appearance and ancestry. Some researchers argue that Charlotte may have had African heritage through a distant Portuguese ancestor. Others claim the evidence is thin and exaggerated. Netflix builds on this debate to show her as Britain's first mixed-race queen, making her story even more dramatic. But was that really the case? Or is it a modern retelling shaped for television? Imagine looking at a royal portrait and seeing not just a queen, but a mystery. For centuries, people have debated the face of Queen Charlotte. Was she the first black Queen of Britain? Or is that idea more legend than fact? In the Netflix series, Charlotte is shown as a woman of mixed race, her heritage placed at the center of the story. This choice was not random. It was inspired by an ongoing historical debate. Some historians point to Charlotte's distant ancestry through a Portuguese noblewoman named Margarida de Castro y Souza. She was believed to have African roots, and through this connection, Charlotte's bloodline may have carried traces of that heritage. Supporters of this theory argue that certain portraits of Charlotte show features that could suggest African descent. They also highlight the writings of court observers, who sometimes described her appearance in unusual ways for a European queen. On the other side, many scholars caution against drawing firm conclusions. They say the evidence is too thin, built on weak genealogy and biased interpretations of old paintings. Portraits were often stylized or idealized, meaning artists painted what was fashionable or flattering rather than the exact truth. In this view, the image of Charlotte as Britain's first mixed-race queen is more speculation than solid fact. Netflix embraced the idea not to present historical certainty, but to expand the world of Bridgerton. By showing Charlotte as a queen of color, the show creates a bridge between history and imagination. It gives modern audiences a symbol of diversity and representation in a setting where such stories are often left untold. In reality, the question of her ancestry may never be answered with complete proof, yet the debate itself has become part of her legacy. What is certain is that Charlotte's presence on the throne came at a time when Britain was deeply involved in the transatlantic slave trade. This context makes the discussion of her possible African heritage even more powerful. Whether the claim is true or not, the symbolism carries weight. The Netflix version transforms that possibility into a central theme, turning Charlotte into a cultural figure who challenges the traditional image of European royalty. Every royal marriage has secrets, but the union of Charlotte and George carried both devotion and tragedy. Netflix paints their relationship as a sweeping romance filled with passion, heartbreak, and loyalty against impossible odds. But what does history tell us about the love between this queen and her king? When Charlotte arrived in England, She barely knew George, yet their marriage began with a rare spark of genuine affection. Unlike many arranged unions of the time, theirs grew into something stronger. They shared private moments of laughter and companionship, building a family of 15 children. For decades, their partnership stood as a symbol of stability in a court that was often full of politics and intrigue. However, the crown did not shield them from pain. King George suffered from mental illness that became more severe as the years passed. He was known for sudden outbursts, confused thoughts, and long periods of instability. At first, Charlotte stood by him with patience. She tried to shield him from public shame and supported his reign in silence. But as his condition worsened, the burden grew heavy. History shows that she eventually distanced herself emotionally, creating a world of her own while doctors and advisors managed the king's decline. The Netflix version chooses to emphasize the enduring romance, showing Charlotte's love as unshakable even when George hides his illness. It creates dramatic scenes where her devotion overcomes despair, framing her as the queen who never stopped loving. This is powerful storytelling, but it softens the harsher reality. The real Charlotte was loyal, yet also human. She struggled with fear, exhaustion, and frustration as the man she married slipped further from her reach still. Their relationship left a legacy that cannot be ignored. Together they shaped the monarchy for nearly 6 decades, and their children continued the royal line into the age of Victoria. Even in the shadow of illness, their union remained one of the longest and most influential in British history. Netflix may give us a love story polished for drama, but beneath it lies a tale of endurance, sacrifice, and a woman forced to balance duty with heartbreak. Power is not always carried in swords or laws. Sometimes it rests in influence, culture, and presence. Queen Charlotte may not have ruled Britain directly, but she shaped the court in ways that changed how the monarchy was seen. She had little authority in politics compared to her husband or ministers, yet she left her mark through culture. Charlotte supported musicians, artists, and scientists. She encouraged the young Mozart, welcomed scholars, and nurtured the gardens of Kew into a place of learning. Her court became known for refinement and elegance, a softer power that touched daily life in Britain. Still, her influence was often limited. Real decisions about war, trade, and governance were in the hands of Parliament and the king. This is where Netflix takes creative liberty. The series presents Charlotte as a force who bends politics, challenges tradition, and leads a daring social reform. At the heart of this invention is the Great Experiment. In the show, the Great Experiment is a move toward racial integration. At court, it suggests that Charlotte's position as a queen of color opened doors for nobles of different backgrounds to rise in power and status. It is a bold storyline that gives the world of Bridgerton its diversity and inclusiveness. But history tells us something different. There is no record of such an experiment in real Britain. The court remained rigid, with nobility bound by bloodlines and traditions. Social mobility for people of African descent or mixed heritage was limited, and slavery was still a reality. Across the empire, Charlotte may have supported art and music, but she did not launch a revolution of equality. That does not mean the choice was meaningless. Netflix uses fiction to fill a gap history often ignores. By creating The Great Experiment, the series asks a question: what if a queen with possible African ancestry had used her position to change the rules of society? The answer is imagined, not recorded, but it allows modern viewers to see a world where diversity is woven into the fabric of high society. The truth lies in balance. The real Queen Charlotte influenced culture and family, while the Netflix Queen Charlotte reimagines power and progress. One shaped gardens and music, the other shapes conversations about race and history today. Together they remind us that storytelling can hold both fact and fantasy, each carrying a different kind of impact. History and drama rarely walk the same path. One offers records and evidence, the other offers emotion and imagination. Queen Charlotte stands at the crossroad of both. The real Charlotte was a queen who left her mark through family, culture, and quiet influence. She raised 15 children, supported science and music, and helped shape the dynasty that led to Queen Victoria. She faced the struggles of a king in decline, carried the weight of duty, and lived in a time when empire and slavery shaped Britain's power. The Netflix Charlotte is different. She is bold, romantic, and revolutionary. She fights for love in the face of despair. She shapes court politics with daring choices. She represents diversity in a world where history often erased such voices. Both versions are powerful, yet they serve different purposes. The question is not only how accurate the show is, but why it chooses to tell the story this way. For some, accuracy matters above all, and they see the great experiment or the racial interpretation of Charlotte as pure fiction. For others, the show is not about facts alone. It is about giving modern audiences a chance to see themselves in the past, to imagine a world where the walls of tradition could have been broken sooner. In the end, Queen Charlotte is remembered in two ways: the queen of history, with her gardens, music, and long marriage to George, and the queen of fiction, with her courage, her love, and her symbolic power. Both leave an impact. Both keep her story alive in the minds of millions. So when you watch the Netflix series, ask yourself, are you seeing history or are you seeing possibility? Maybe the answer is both, and maybe that is why her story continues to fascinate us today. If you enjoyed this journey into truth and imagination, share your thoughts. Was Queen Charlotte a forgotten pioneer of diversity? Or is she simply a queen rewritten by modern storytellers? Let me know in the comments. And do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories where history and drama collide. Behind the crown there was another story, one told through the lives of her children. Queen Charlotte was not only a queen, she was a mother of 15, and her family became both her pride and her greatest challenge. At first, the royal household seemed full of promise. With so many sons and daughters, the dynasty appeared secure. Yet the reality was far more complicated. Several of her children struggled with duty, marriage, and responsibility. Many of her sons resisted marrying at all, creating tensions about succession. Others lived with personal scandals that shook the image of the monarchy. For Charlotte, this meant carrying the burden of trying to control a family that often refused to be controlled. Netflix touches on her role as a mother, showing her as both strict and loving, but the truth was even heavier. Historical records describe her as deeply protective of her children, sometimes stern, sometimes cold, yet always aware that their lives would reflect on the crown itself. She pushed them toward arranged marriages, often facing resistance, and this caused conflict inside the palace. One of her greatest legacies was through her granddaughter, Queen Victoria. The throne passed down through Charlotte's bloodline, and Victoria would go on to define an entire age of British history. In this way, Charlotte's influence stretched far beyond her own lifetime, shaping the monarchy for generations to come. But her legacy is not only about dynasties. It is about the picture of a woman who endured a husband's illness, raised a vast family, and carried the weight of expectation in an empire at its peak. She was not a revolutionary, yet she lived in a world full of change. She did not break the walls of tradition, yet her presence in history continues to spark debates about identity, power, and heritage. Netflix amplifies this legacy, turning her into a symbol of resilience and diversity. Whether the real Charlotte truly held that role or not, the show ensures she is remembered as more than just a queen at her husband's side. She becomes a character who speaks to modern audiences, reminding us that history is never simple and that the past can still shape the conversations of today. Every version of Queen Charlotte tells a different story. The historian Charlotte is a queen bound by duty, raising a vast family while surviving the decline of her husband. The artist Charlotte is a patron of culture, music, and science, leaving a mark that still shapes Britain's heritage. And the Netflix Charlotte is a vision of resilience, passion, and representation. Crafted to speak to modern audiences, accuracy and imagination are not enemies. They are two paths that lead us to think about the past in new ways. The facts remind us of who she was. The fiction invites us to wonder who she might have been. Together they keep her name alive in a world that often forgets the women behind the crown. So how accurate was Netflix's Queen Charlotte? The answer is both less and more than we expect. Less because the great experiment and the sweeping political How are our inventions for drama? More, because the show captures something real about endurance, love, and legacy, even if the details are shaped by storytelling. What matters is that her story continues to inspire. A queen once seen only in portraits has become a subject of debate, imagination, and admiration. She is no longer just a figure in the background of King George's reign. She is a queen who belongs to history and to the present. Now the question is yours. Do you see Queen Charlotte as Britain's first black queen, a cultural patron, a devoted wife, or a creation of modern storytelling? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell me which version speaks to you the most. And if you want more journeys where history and drama collide, remember to like this video and subscribe for the next story, because every crown hides a tale, and every tale deserves to be told.